Cosby Cougars. Here is your high school test breakdown that I promised. So you're going to be thinking about 68 points. This is how many points are available on the high school test. Don't confuse points with percent. Every multiple choice question is worth 1 point and your essay is worth 16 points. So this is how that looks. Your test is truly half reading and half writing. So there are 34 points available on the reading or the writing half of the test and 34 points available on the reading half of the test. We're going to talk about writing first because it's a little bit different. So in writing, you have two parts to the test. You have your essay, which I already told you is worth 16 points. And then you have two multiple choice sections. One is revising and one is editing. And there are 9 questions worth 1 point each in those sections for a total of 18. So we have 16 plus 9 plus 9 equals the 34 points available. So 2 people are going to read and score your essay. So if scorer 1 gave you a 4 and scorer 2 gave you a 4, we would add those together for the 8 and then multiply it by 2 for the 16. If scorer 1 gave you a 2 and scorer 2 gave you a 3, we would add 3 plus 2 for 5, multiply it by 2, and you would get 10. This is your minimum goal for that essay. You want to try to get 10 out of the 16 points available on your essay, so this is your goal. Now, revising and editing. You need to understand the difference between revising and editing because you need to tell your brain to be working on the right things when you're working on each part of the test. Revising is making changes to content. Editing is correcting mistakes. We talk about these two things together a lot in class, but there is a real difference. You can know on the test what your job is. You have to read the italicized portion right underneath the directions. It will tell you whether you are helping Joey make changes to his paper or helping him to correct his paper. If it says help make changes, you should not be looking for mistakes. They're not there. If you are reading that passage and you're looking for mistakes, you're wasting your brain power because it's trying to find something that does not exist. These are the questions that say, Johnny needs to add this sentence to paragraph 4. Where should he add it? And the answer choices will be after sentence 1, after sentence 2, after sentence 3, after sentence 4. Editing is correcting mistakes. So if that italicized portion asks you to help Johnny correct his paper, then your brain should be looking for mistakes. There are some mistakes in that paper that you are going to be correcting. So that's the difference between revising and editing, very important, because you do not want to waste any brain power during these 5 hours. The reading part of the test. There are going to be 8 points or 8 questions across genre. You know that genre is a type of reading that you do. Across genre means that more than one genre is involved in some way. There will be some questions on vocabulary because all types of reading require you to understand the words that are used to create that text. And then there will be questions that ask you about more than one type at the same time. An example might be the question that says, how is the speaker of the poem similar to the character in the story? These are the hardest questions on that test. 13 points, 13 questions are based on literary text. Literary text is fiction, drama, poetry, and literary nonfiction. Literary nonfiction is autobiography, biography, memoir, pieces that are true, but you read them like they were a story. You're going to have a fiction piece for sure. We don't know about drama, poetry, or literary nonfiction. You may have one of these, you may have two of these. It varies every year on the test. 13 questions about these types of text. And then you're going to have 13 questions on informational text. Informational text is expository, persuasive, procedural, and sometimes media literacy. Procedural and media literacy are different because they will be buried inside of another type of text. That's called embedded. For example, if you were reading an article about bakeries, which is expository, buried inside of the article might be a recipe for a famous chocolate chip cookie. The recipe is procedural, but it is inside or embedded in the expository text. Same with media literacy. There may be a map or a website that shows where different bakeries are located. That is media literacy because it's something found in media, but it will be buried inside of an expository piece. You will have expository for sure. You may or may not have persuasive. You may or may not have procedural. You may or may not have media literacy buried inside. Okay? So that's how the test shakes out, what's available. You need a minimum of 42 points to pass. So when you think you're finished with this test, you're not finished. What I want you to do while you're working, I want you to put a check mark inside of your test booklet by any question that you feel really good about. You really think you got that one correct. Put a question mark by any question that you weren't sure about. You just guessed, you couldn't decide between two choices, you just picked one. When you think you're finished, count your check marks and add 8 to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room with that essay. If it does not add up to around 50, then you need to go back and try to change some of those question marks to check marks. Actually, you should go back and change question marks to check marks, whether you are at 50 or not. The reason I'm saying 50 instead of 42 is that you may have a field test embedded. Embedded, once again, means buried inside. So there might be a passage and questions that belong to it that don't really count toward your points. But the trick is we don't know what one that is. We don't know which passage, we don't know which questions. So you need to give yourself a nice amount of slack when you are going back and checking your work. If you have closely read and worked on that essay, this test should take you between 3 and 3.5 hours to complete. If you have time left out of the 5 hours, really important, go back, count check marks, try to turn question marks to check marks. So Next week is really important for all of you. Just know that you are supported, and we know that everybody is going to do really well. So have a great day on test day. Eat breakfast. Feel good about what you're doing. Show what you know as a reader and writer. I'll talk to you soon.